to Out of State DMing Podcast. I'm your host, lluksblackheart. Today we will be going over equipment. We're going to be first starting off with the most important gear of all, gold. You could use the starting packages based on your class, because they do have those. But this is a good chart, but to mark down what you do and do not have based on how much money you have. And as you can, let me zoom in so it's a lot better for you to. You can see that each class has their own monies. This is pretty important because without this, you can't have any equipment. And there's generally, in my experience, 3 ways to do it. There's the normal roll, which, as you can probably see with some of the classes, they don't get very much. Like monks getting pretty much next to nothing, but yet again, monks don't necessarily need a whole lot of equipment. I mean, because they don't use armor and they don't use shields. Then if you go up, like fighters, paladins, and rangers, they get the most monies, and that's pretty much because the armor and equipment they generally use, it's generally more expensive than what everyone else generally tends to use. Now the DM says we're not rolling, that we're just going to take the average. You just take the average, which some people don't like because they still go, I can't afford what I want to get, and it's because they're trying to literally buy the most expensive things, forgetting that as you're going on adventuring, you can pick up more gear, you can pick up more stuff, so you're not supposed to start out with the absolute best. You're supposed to start out with whatever is needed to get the job done. Then, of course, as we go over some of the equipment and what some of the equipment does or does not do, I'll be pointing out certain why go for this expensive item over here when this cheaper one here does the exact same thing. In other cases, there's option 3, which is something I occasionally do with people who aren't fully used to playing D&D, and or if I know the campaign is going to be relatively tough, I just tell everyone max coins. Your character starts out with absolute max amount of whatever it's supposed to be there. Which I don't recommend doing often, because you run across the people who assume that just because it happened in campaign A, it's going to happen in all campaigns. So they, without even asking, they'll just give themselves max gold, buy a bunch of stuff, and then when you look at them and go, why'd you do that? They're like, well, you did it over here, why wouldn't you do it here? It's like, well, that was a relatively hard campaign where I wanted everyone to start out with a certain edge, and this is as a normal run-of-the-mill campaign, and there's even some people who don't know what they're doing here. So instead of confusing them, I'm going straight out of the book. So it is a slippery slope to people assuming you're going to do certain things when you're not. So once you get your character's money sorted out, while it's rolling average or the DM just telling you a number, you can start going over certain other things, because like wealth and money. Part of your character's wealth isn't just in raw coins, which you can see the conversion levels from copper to silver to gold to platinum. Can also somewhat be valued in, like, for instance, trade goods. So you could possibly become a trader if you really want to force the campaign in that way, where you buy a bunch of stuff and then you go to different areas and try and sell it. Selling loot, you get half the price for it, unless the DM says otherwise. With trade goods usually being the ones that don't necessarily. There's like a trade good in this sense is a valuable good that can be easily exchanged, almost as if it were cash itself. Wheat, flour, cloth, shit, yeah, those things can actually be used as actual currency. Well, they can be used as currency instead of actual coins because those things generally don't have a depreciation. I mean, their value doesn't necessarily like, plummet or anything. That's generally considered something valuable. For instance, like a cow, 10 gold pieces. No matter what you do, a cow's going to be worth a pretty penny, alive or dead. It's worth it. Uh, Iron's cheap, wheat cheap. Like a lot of things are super cheap, but their value as an actual currency can still be used, so you can use it to trade for different other goods and or services because it actually has a value that doesn't necessarily drop. But on the other hand, a lot of people ignore this because they either A, don't understand it, or B, don't want to turn around excess weight that they can't afford to carry around because the the lower your strength score, the less amount of stuff you can carry, the less amount of stuff you can carry, the less amount of stuff you have. So a lot of those things there, a lot of people just go, nope, not doing it. The first weapons we're going to be, first usable things that a lot of people go for or are going to go into is weapons because it's right here first. Weapons are come into different categories. Firstly, there's melee and range weapons. The main difference is melee use strength for hitting damage, ranged use dexterity just to hit. You're probably thinking, why would you use a ranged weapon over a melee weapon? Well, it's range. The farther you are away from the target, usually the better, because that target can't hit you if it's that far away. So you're safer, and generally you can start attacking before the melee people get a chance to attack, unless you're like in a dungeon or enclosed space, then it's actually initiative score. There's also reach weapons, so there is a bundle of weapons that, because of what they are, have a reach of 10 feet instead of 5 feet, which means instead of having to be adjacent to the target, there can be space between you and them. Whips can go out to 15. Thing to note, though, that not all not all reach weapons can attack a target that's adjacent to you. Most of them, if they're right standing next to you, you can't hit them with it because the damage end of the weapon is up over here, while, like, if you go to swing with it, you're hitting them with the shaft. So the game goes, no. So, like, a lot of, like, the glaives, the gusars, the long spears, the rosiers, you generally can't actually do any of that because they're too close. There's also, when it comes to ranged weapons, thrown weapons. Thrown weapons don't have the range that other ranged weapons do, but the trade-off from being shorter range is thrown weapons do get to add strength to their damage. So it's relatively nice if you're a strength dex build and you still want to do ranged, go thrown weapons. Otherwise, you're having to wait to get certain other types of weapons. When it comes to weapons, there's simple, martial, and exotic. Unless you're certain classes, you're not going to be able to use all weapons. Exotic weapons, no matter what your class, you have to take the feat to be proficient with that specific weapon. Certain races, such as like half orcs and dwarves, get to use certain racial weapons, which we'll get into later. But that has to do with racial shenanigans and not generic shenanigans. And there's a bundle of different random things. There's even double weapons that count as two weapons, which means you can either do one attack with it normally or do two attacks. Like, for instance, like a dire flail, dwarven urgosh, the gnome hooked hammer, orc double axe, so there's like a bundle of them that, because of what it is, it counts as two weapons. Ammunition, of course, is for ranged weapons. There's light weapons. Well, when it this is mainly for melee. There's light, one-handed, technically one-handed light because they boom, and two-handed weapons. Each have their own little niche. Light weapons you can take the feat weapon finesse with, but it's not for all weapons, it's for that particular weapon. And it's where you use your dexterity to hit instead of your strength. Strength is still used for damage, but it's not used to hit. So if you have a high dex build and you still want to do melee, you can take weapon finesse for a light weapon. Light weapons are also really good if you're trying to do two-weapon fighting, because if your offhand weapon is a light weapon, you suffer less penalties. Yeah. You also have to remember, if you use it in your offhand, you light weapons in your offhand, you don't add full strength modifier, you add half. And it's same for one-handed weapons, because if it's in your offhand, you're only adding half your strength to it. So if you have a +1, it's because it's always rounded down. You have a +1 to damage with your main hand, but +0 with this one because it always rounds down. Just when you cut it in half, you round down. So your offhand doesn't start getting bonuses until you have at least a +2 in your strength. One-handed weapons, it has a note here that if a one-handed weapon is wielded with two hands during melee combat, you add 1.5 times your character's strength to it, which is pretty much you're treating it as a two-handed weapon. So it means like a long sword gripped with two hands instead of one hand. Instead of adding like a +2 to your strength, you're adding +2 because of your strength. You're adding a +3, and that's only for damage, not to hit. Hitting is still whatever your strength modifier is. Damage is strength in half. Two-handed weapons always have additional 50% damage rolls. Just you, boom. The difference between one-handed and two-handed is two-handed, you're stuck with it. You can't, in essence, a buckler, you can't use shields, you can't attack and hold on to something. Just you need two hands to actually swing that weapon. And that goes into because the size of the weapon, the weight of the weapon, how the weight's disputed, like ranged weapons, with the exception of the web, are always two-handed. Size does matter on weapons because despite the fact they don't actually have it listed when it comes to a lot of the weights, damage is important because the smaller the weapon, the less damage it does. So it's listed, and once we get into those things, I'll be able to better go into details with it. But like the small weapons generally just do hot garbage. So being a small character like a gnome or a halfling, your damage output with weapons isn't going to be very good in comparison to your larger counterparts like the dwarf, the elf, or the human. Their weapons are doing slightly better damage. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to hit more, but it means they get the extra oomph. Inappropriate size weapons is pretty much if you're trying to use a weapon that is not your size, you take a -2 for each size category that you're different. So if you're a halfling trying to use a medium-sized longsword, yeah, you're doing more damage with it, but you also have a -2 to hit. But if you're like, okay, I'm gonna go take this large size club we got from the ogre, well, you're small size because you're a halfling. Yeah, it does more damage, but because it's two size two sizes above yours, you're taking a -4 to hit. So it does add up. And I will always say accuracy is better than roll damage, because there's no point in having a high damage weapon or high damage ability if you cannot hit your targets. So even though some things may be not as damaging as you want, hitting's more important because you're hitting it, therefore damage is being done. So if you set up one way to go, I have like a +5 to hitting with this here, but it doesn't do much damage as this over here, but if I swing with this, I'm only getting a +2. +5, +2. The +5 is going to hit more. You don't have to roll as high to hit. Yeah, you may need to get like 2 hits just to equal the round of damage as this one, but you're actually going to have a greater chance of hitting with that +5 than that +2. And that's from experience as a player and as a DM, seeing people with high damage attacks struggling to hit a DC 15 because they don't have a big bonus, but then someone shows up with a not so damaging weapon, but they're actually defeating the bad guys because they're hitting. Like one of my favorite examples with accuracy over damage was the fact that I was a player, just for context. We were fighting a large group of skeletons. Everyone else was not only having a problem of hitting, but a problem of damage because they weren't using bludgeoning things. I wasn't the most damaging party member because I was the rogue. I need to sneak up and do stuff. But I'm the one that defeated the skeletons because I was actually hitting the skeletons. I had a significantly better to hit than the rest of the party. I also was using a bludgeoning weapon, so that also helped out a lot. But I was the only one hitting, so I practically felt like I soloed 6 skeletons, despite the fact that there was other party members, but they just weren't hitting because they couldn't roll high enough, because they didn't have the bonuses. So if anyone tries to belittle you for having a low damage attack, go, well, I'm set up for accuracy. Because, again, accuracy over damage, in my thing, is preferred, unless you're fighting something that you know that you actually need that damage for, because DRs and hardness then come into apply there, but that's not every single fight. That's some fights. That's certain enemy types. Improvised weapons is pretty much items that don't actually count as actual weapons, but technically could be used as weapons. You suffer a -4 penalty to using those weapons. For instance, one of my players in one of my current games, she's using her frying pan. That's what she wants to use as her primary weapon, which normally that huge penalty would make her not so effective, but there is a feat called improvised weapons that lets you use weapons that aren't like the frying pan, that are considered improvised without that -4 penalty. Qualities. Oh, there's a bundle of different qualities. Damage for starters, which it does go have this chart here where it goes into medium, tiny, and large for references in what that weapon would normally do. So you can probably see bigger the weapon, the better, smaller weapon, the worse. But it also comes down to what actually you're using. Cost is also somewhat important, because if you don't know the cost of a weapon, there's a chance that you're not going to be able to get the weapon because you don't know the cost. Thank God there's a chart for that. Criticals. Criticals are important because not only some weapons have a higher times, but a higher range. Now, I'm going to state this right now because for some reason a lot of people can like to confuse critical range with a natural 20. A natural 20 is an automatic hit. Okay, boom. It's an automatic hit. But if you have a weapon that has, let's say, an 18 to 20 crit range, if you get an 18 or 19 on your die 20 roll, it's not an automatic hit. You still have to actually hit the target. The difference is, if you hit it, you're considered threatening, which means you get to roll to confirm. So, like I said, unlike a natural 20 that automatically hits, high crit weapons don't automatically hit. They just have a chance of always being considered high damaging because of that range there. Range increments are also important. That's one of the reasons why when I said if you're going with thrown weapons, they don't go as far as other weapons. It's because they just don't go as far. While other more dedicated ranged weapons can go quite far. And a thing to note that for every range increment that the target succeeds, for instance, because it does use the examples, if like the short bow has a range increment of 60 feet, it can strike enemies up to pretty much that distance away with no penalties. However, for each time it exceeds that, because if it's right there to say it's 60 feet or more, you take a a minus 2 penalty. And for every degree of 60, it's a cumulative minus 2 to a maximum of 10 times your bow's maximum range. Thrown weapons can only go up to 5 times because, again, they don't go as far. But a big thing, if you're trying to shoot out to 10 times your range increment of your bow, that's a minus 18 to your attack roll. So unless the target has a really low AC or you have a lot of bonuses, I don't recommend it because you're already having problems spotting the target. But yet again, you also have a big bonuses to just trying to hit the target. Give and takes. Weight is important because, well, if you're carrying too much weight, it reduces how much dexterity you can put into your AC and how fast you can go. Weapon types is because there's multiple damage types. Piercing, slashing, bludgeoning. And those are some important, not necessarily off the get-go, but there's certain enemy types that have a DR that can only be bypassed by certain types, like skeletons are bludgeoning, zombies are slashing. So it is kind of a big deal to know what exactly you're doing with. And there are some weapons that have more than one typing, but the problem is with just about all of them, with the exception of like the Morningstar. It's like, for instance, a dagger is slashing / piercing. It does not mean it does both every time you hit. It means depending on how you're attacking depends on if it's slashing damage or piercing damage. So if you're stabbing with the dagger, you're piercing them. But if you're, did I say slashing? Yeah, no, I said stabbing. If you're slashing, like you're trying to just cut them, it does slashing damage. So stab, pierce, slashing. Some weapons do have special qualities, and we'll get into those as those boom. Weapon descriptions. A lot of weapons have their own little details. Sometimes they don't because there's nothing special to them, but a lot of their specialty things it does tell you. Like arrows can be used as a light improvised weapon that does the same damage as a dagger. So it's like, okay, boom. An arrow that hits a target is destroyed. One that misses has a 50% chance of being destroyed or lost. Some DMs will be kind of not always have it destroyed, but technically speaking, it's by the rules. Arrow hits, it's gone. Even though in real life it's... so it's DM prerogative. Throwing axes, it tells you it's going to be thrown. Boom. Or double axe, it can, like I said, a lot of these descriptions tell you exactly what the weapon technique can do, and it'll also go to, hey, go look at this over here. Like the orc double axe can be used as a two-handed, it can be used as a two-weapon fighting because it's a dual weapon. Some of the descriptions are pretty blunt, like battle axe. Battle axe is the most common melee weapon amongst dwarves. That right there, straight, boom. Other ones go to a lot more details, like bolts can be used, just like arrows can be used as improvised weapons. Bolas can be used to trip people. Clubs, simple thing there. Light crossbows, chain, spike chain, bullet slings. They all go into their own little details on how to do things. They heavy crossbow. Normally, operating a heavy crossbow requires two hands. However, you can shoot but not reload a heavy crossbow with one hand at a -4 penalty to the attack roll. So you can one hand shoot, probably gonna miss, but you can one hand shoot, but you can't reload it. You can shoot a heavy crossbow with each hand, but you can take a penalty on attack rolls as if attacking with two-weapon boom. So right there, dual rule crossbows. Bam. But at the same time, you're taking a -4 penalty for shooting with one hand, and the penalties for shooting with for two-weapon fighting. So I wouldn't recommend it. Use the hand crossbow if you really want to do that. Light crossbow, it does have pictures on what a lot of these weapons do look like, so there's no boom. Like for instance, like the glaive, the long spear, like these here are reach weapons. So when I say if they're too close to you, you can't really hit with that end, it's because you'll be hitting them with mainly this part. So it's like you're bonking them. Even though in real life that can still hurt a lot, but the same thing there, it's like you're not using the weapon properly because you're not hitting with the end you're supposed to be hitting with. So it's generally smart to keep your enemies at a distance by going, here's an ally, here's you, you can attack around the ally because the game permits you to do that. And it starts to go into the actual listing where it tells you what category it counts as. Well, it's like simple weapons, cost, damage for a small, medium, critical, range, weight, typing. And it'll also then tell you if it counts as like an unarmed attack, which is like gauntlets or unarmed strike. Light weapons, one-handed, two-handed, range weapons. And again, these are the simple ones. So generally a lot of classes, so therefore a lot of people can use a lot of these. And as you can see, it goes down into how cheap or expensive a lot of these things are. Like for instance, if you look at just the damage, and we'll be using the medium one because most people are medium, does not everyone likes to go for the smaller races. You can see that there's a lot of die 4, then there's a bundle of die 6, and then a bundle of die 8 with some being slightly more damaging, like the heavy crossbow being a die 10. But if you're looking at a bundle of weapons and you want to save money, look at what the weapon does versus what you're trying to go for. For instance, my favorite weapon for 8 gold pieces is the Morning Star. It's a die 8 times 2 critical, 6 pounds, and it's bludgeoning and piercing. Unlike if you can see there with with the dagger what says piercing or slashing. The Morning Star I love is because when it hits, because it spins a ball with spikes on it. When it hits, it's considered doing both typings. No, it does not mean it does 2 die 8 or 50% is this, 50% is that. It means if something has a DR that can be bypassed by one of those, and or if it's for some reason immune to one of those, the Morning Star goes, I don't care, because it qualifies as both. And because it qualifies as both, it gets around DRs that can be used against it, like a skeleton's DR. But if something, for instance, is like, oh, it's immune to bludgeoning damage, so your weapon's not going to work. It's like, oh, dude, Morningstar, piercing, bam, still does its full damage. So it is a get around for a lot of random things, while other ones aren't. So if you're trying to save money, again, look at look at it like the heavy mace, bludgeoning, die 8, weighs 2 pounds more, but also cost 4 gold more because it's 12 gold. So if you're trying to reserve weight and have a little bit of spending cash, go for the Morning Star, not the heavy mace, unless you want the heavy mace. But if you're still trying to do damage and stuff, you can go, for instance, like, let's say, the long spear. It does a die 8 for 5 gold pieces. Or if you're not caring about reach, go for the spear. It is still two-handed, so you can boom, but it's 2 gold pieces, still does a die 8. If you confirm the crit, it's a ×3, and if you need to, you can throw it with a range of 20 feet. So it's like right there, it does good damage, good crit, and you can throw it. So you can buy multiple of them. So instead of it going, well, I'm just going to, and that guy goes with the mace, you can go, well, I bought 6 spears. If you go, well, you're not going to be as effective, so you can go, no, I'm going to be more effective, because damage output, it's the same, unless it's a confirmed crit, and you can go, well, I'll just simply do something you can't. What? I throw my spear at that target. So it's like right there, you're going a cheaper route, but you have more options. And also, by comparison, it weighs 2 pounds less than the heavy mace. When we go down to martial weapons, which there is also two-handed and range ones there, some of these can be a little more cheaper, but they're like throwing axes are 8 gold pieces for a die 6 and a range of 10 feet. So you're probably thinking like a javelin, which is the same damage type, would be better. Technically, yeah, because both can be used as a melee weapon. But if you're trying to go for distance, go javelin because it has the same damage but goes farther. So it's like a lot of them have good property stuff. It's like there's a lot of people that want straight crits, so they go like, I'm gonna go with the Kurai because it's an 18 to 20, yay. It's like, okay, yeah, 8 gold pieces, die 4 damage, so you're relying more on getting really high. But if you then go to, let's say, like their rapier or the scimitar, which, yeah, does cost significantly more because the rapier is a 20 gold piece item, but it does a die 6 instead of a die 4, so you're already doing there, and it's an 18 to 20. So you keep this, you have the same crit range, same damage, but you're spending more money. I sometimes love typos. The sap is the damage is severely typoed. That 3 should not be there. Yeah. It's like the longsword, die 8, 19 to 20, 15 gold pieces. But the short sword does slightly less damage, cheaper, but has the same crit thing. So it's like, if you're trying to go for damage or whatnot, yeah. Two-handed weapons are generally more about just raw damage, but you then have to look at what two-handed weapon you're using, while it's a reach one or not. Does some of them you may think, well, this great axe is ×3 on crit range, 20 gold pieces, and it does a die 12. Yeah, well, that die 12 is pretty much the same as the greatsword, but the greatsword, in my opinion, is better, even though it does cost way more. The difference is your minimum and average damage rolls are going to be better. Even though you don't have the ×3, you have a slightly better chance of getting an actual crit because it's a 19 to 20. But the reason why I say the damage is better, because without strength, your great axe is 1 to 12 damage, with an average probably being 6, with the average being 6. While the great sword is minimum 2 damage, so already you're doing more damage. Maximum is still the same, 12, so they boom. But the average is going to be around 7. So because you're rolling 2 dice, you actually have a decent chance of getting higher damage output. It's only if you're trying to go with saving money that I'll go for the great axe. but then you also have to look at what other weapons. If you're trying to go for reach, well, there's multiple. There's the glaive, the guitar, the lance, and the resisar. So if you're going for reach, boom. But then again, you also have to still look at what's the cost, what's the damage output. Does the die 10 for the glaive is decent. The 2 die 4 for the disarm, well, yeah, disarm. Yeah, max 8 damage times 3 on crit, but it's eh. It's more like a fancy boom. The resisar, same thing. It's more expensive than the glaive, but you're gonna do slightly less damage. So some of these are more like, let's go fancier because of what you prefer versus what you have. Ranged weapons. The main difference between all four of these base martial ones is damage and range. If you're trying to be more of a, I want to try to be Legolas to shoot things from far away, longbows. And there's two longbows, the standard and the composite. The only difference between the two, besides the fact a 25 gold piece difference, is the composite can shoot 10 feet farther. Otherwise, damage is the same, crit modifier is the same. But if you're trying to not go for range, because you're trying to, a lot of the feats do require you to be within at least 30 feet, then you could probably go for the cheaper option, which is the short bow, which only has a range of 60 feet, but it's a die 6, so you're trading a little bit of damage for the going cheaper. Well, the composite one still does 6 damage, goes 70 feet, but it's worth the same as an actual longbow, so I would actually just say go with a longbow at that point. But most, if not all players, just go longbows, because damage. They love the damage output. And you're not necessarily saving too much on weight. 2-pound bow versus a 3-pound bow. So it's mainly how far do you want to shoot, and how much money do you want to spend. If you're saving money, short bows. If you don't care, long bows. Exotic weapons. I have a love-hate with exotic weapons, mainly because there is a bunch of people out there that assume that they take the feat once, they can use all exotic weapons, because they didn't read it. No, each one of these needs its own feat, so right there, you should be worried on whether or not you actually take it. Some races that you take these weapons, for instance, the half-orc can use the orc double axe, the dwarf can use the dwarven war axe, and the dwarven ergosh, because those are racial weapons. But if you notice, the only real perk to some of these weapons are they're doubled. Like the orc double axe is a doubled axe. There's an axe head on 2 heads, so you get to do 2 attacks with it, which does have its own penalties and stuff because it goes under 2-weapon fighting. But if you go that route, you can do a lot of damage output because you're getting a lot more of attacks. More attacks means more chance of hitting. More chance of hitting means more damage. Like the 2-bladed sword, die 8s, 19 to 20 crit range. And my favorite range weapons when it comes to crossbows are the repeating, but again, exotic weapon focus is needed for them. But they have okay ranges, but the thing I like about the repeaters over the normal crossbows is a normal crossbow fire reload. The hand crossbow is pretty much, it's simple, you shoot, you can fire, boom. Light crossbow is a move action to load it, so you fire and move. So unless you get the feat rapid reload, or quick reload, lightning reload. You're pretty much just doing 1 attack a turn no matter what, but if you get lightning reload, you can pull off 2 attacks a turn, which is great because with that you can fire a lot more. While the heavy crossbow, it's a full round action to reload it, so you're firing, reloading, boom. Repeaters, well, it be the light repeater or the heavy repeater, has pretty much this cartridge. The cartridge has 5 bolts in it, so you can pretty much get off a bundle of attacks with it. So it's like you can get if you're firing only like one attack a turn because you can only fire one attack a turn until you get high enough levels. That's 5 turns of shooting, move action to reload, and you just keep firing. Like the lightning reload pretty much turns into a free action because you're just taking cartridge boom because you can just boom. So you can just keep firing with it while other people are going, well, I have to actually worry about reloading and all this stuff here, while repeaters go, I don't care. It's one of those you don't need lightning reload to actually be effective with it because, again, unless you're trying to get a crap of attacks in one turn, no. But it's also one of those things that with the ranged weapons, range, damage, crits, cost, and weight. If you notice, like the heavy repeating crossbow, it's a 400 gold piece item. That's expensive. No one's starting with that. If you do certain things, you can start out with the hand crossbow, which has 100 gold pieces, but again, you're also spending feet to become proficient with it. So a lot of these weapons, because of just off of price, you're possibly not starting out with, or you're limiting yourself to it. Like, there's been times where people are like, I'm going to start with a composite longbow. Well, that's 100 gold pieces. Some of the classes, even maxing out, you're either can't because you can't afford it, or B, you're not starting out with much of any of the things there because most of your gold has just been spent on a single weapon. Not even ammunition for a weapon, because ammunition is not free. So you have to watch exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it, because just trying to get properly equipped with weapons will drain your bank account immediately, because again, not all of them are cheap. So one of the things I usually like to tell people is, other than buying a dagger, because everyone needs a dagger, don't focus on weapons or even armor first. Buy a bunch of the other equipment, then get some decent armor, and then get an okay weapon. Because again, getting what you need to start with is generally more important than just, I bought this over expensive item that drained my bank account. Like, for instance, the Great Axe is 50 gold pieces. The Falchion, which is a decent weapon, does it's a 2-die 8, well, 2-die 4, 18 to 20 crit range. It's a decent weapon, but that's 75 gold pieces. That's a lot of your money right there for a single weapon. Which means you're not getting as some of the bigger, more important armors. If you're a fighter, if you're a barbarian, you're probably not going to care, but barbarians don't get that much money anyways, so you're going to still be conscious. So, general rule of thumb I like to enforce is, don't go expensive. It does not matter if you want to be fancy or not. You can work up to it. Work up to it. Because again, this is what you start with. It's not what you're going to be with by the end of the campaign. By the end of the campaign, you could end up with some weird weapon that pretty much can one-shot God. It's not what you started with, it's what you're ending with. Same with anything else. So unless you don't care about money, or don't care about what little things you may or may not need, then go with the fancy, expensive stuff. But if you're trying to pinch it to make sure you have a well-rounded equipment, look at the damage output, crits, and weight before you look at the price. Because again, just looking at here, the Great Club and the Heavy Flail do the same damage. One weighs slightly less, one has slightly better crits, but look at the pricing. The Great Club, 5 gold. Heavy Flail, 15 gold. So you can buy 3 of those clubs for just one of those flails. And the more important thing is the dire flail has different options. Like, you can trip and disarm people with it. So you have a lot more options with it. So if you're trying to disarm people, go for the flail. If you're trying to have money left over to possibly buy other things, go for the club. If you're trying to go for crits, flail. If you're trying to go conserve weight, club. So it's like there's multiple factors you should take into account other than just going me likey, me wanty, me buyy. And that can be said for simple weapons and all martial weapons. And if some say like special for weight, go look it up there. It tells you, because sometimes it's like, oh, it just weighs as much as this, or just adds a certain small to it. So they take multiple things to consider. Because again, being able to afford everything is generally important, especially if you want your character to survive long enough to do it. And when it comes to like weapons, sometimes the fancy weapon sucks, because there's a cheaper weapon that does the same thing, or another weapon that lets you have more options, so you don't actually have to worry about replacing it anytime soon or trying to get a better version because you have a very good weapon. And another thing to note, that if a DM decides to have you start with max money or average money, don't argue with him. Just go with it, because there's a good chance that they are trying to look out for your best interests. If a DM's having you roll, well, that's because he's not the bad guy. He just, again, the book says roll. We don't have to do average. We don't have to do all this. Roll. And if a DM decides that, hey, because of this campaign here, you guys all bought this equipment here, well, gain back the money for your weapon, because I'm having you guys start out with, like, you get this, and you get that, you get this, you get that, because, well, he just wants you guys to have certain things, because he feels that the campaign needs to go a certain way with this equipment, because it helps you overall. Because when I say I've ran into certain circumstances where I've said the party's going to be fighting a lot of undead, and then people end up with a lot of piercing weapons instead of slashing and or bludgeoning weapons. It's just like, okay, well, here's a bunch of zombies. You guys aren't doing anything to it except for that one person with the axe, because he's the only one that's bypassing his DR5. Or here's a bunch of skeletons. The only person that's doing anything is the person who took the flail, because it's bludgeoning. Everyone else is doing little to no damage because of DR5/bludgeoning. So there's particular campaigns where if a DM looks at what the parties equipped themselves with, looks at what information he's given them, he can go, I know you want that, do this instead. Do that instead. And if everyone goes, why? It's like, what information did I tell you? That we're going to be fighting undead, and you took a rapier. Well, that's because of like, crits and stuff. It's like, undead are immune to crits. Don't worry about crit weapons if you're fighting something that's common knowledge is crits aren't gonna work. So it's like, if the goes, go with a slashing and or a bludgeoning weapon. Either of those things will work in this campaign. Don't look at him like he's stupid. Take his advice. Because unless he's deliberately known for misleading people, don't assume he's misleading you. That being said, I just realized I had certain things not updated. I'll worry about that later. But thanks for showing up. Thanks for doing anything. Remember to like and subscribe. And I'll talk to you guys next week.